Have you ever thought about building a real estate empire, investing in multifamily homes or maybe small apartment buildings? How do you do it? What do you look for? And if you do buy a multifamily home and you're dealing with tenants, what are some of the common mistakes that landlords make? It's the Real Estate Show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I want to get serious here. I've had a lot of clients in the past talk to me about their dreams of building a small real estate empire. We've all thought about it. You buy a multifamily home or a couple of multifamily homes, maybe a small multi-unit building, and you have rents coming in that not only give you a cash flow, but also cover the costs of the building. It's an interesting concept, but the reality is there's a lot of challenges that you need to look at when you're becoming a real estate investor. Let's talk about a few of them. The first thing is to do what I call a cost analysis. You know, when you're looking at a building, there are a lot of different things that are going to come into play as far as operating that building. Not only the mortgage and the interest and the insurance and those kinds of things, but also utility costs, maintenance costs, repair costs, and a number of different things that are involved. So you really want to study what the numbers are. One of the investors out there makes the recommendation that whatever you pay for the building, you need to get at least 1% of that amount in order to cover the expenses on the building. So the example that was given is if you buy a building for $300,000, you want to have rents coming in of at least $3,000 or so a month in order to operate that building. But that's not always the case. You have to look at each individual building as it is and what it's going to be involved in it. The other thing is you have to wrap your head around the idea that if you're going to own a multifamily property or a multi-unit building, you're going to be dealing with tenants. Now, sometimes you'll find a property where the numbers are going to work and there are tenants that are already in place. Don't get overexcited about the numbers. You want to make sure that you know who is renting in the building. Are they on leases? Are they month to month? How long have they been there? What kind of rents are they paying? Do they pay their rents on time? What is their lifestyle? And what I mean by that is, are they people that work at night? Do they work during the day? How does that work with the rest of the tenants that are in the building? You want to know who is there. You also might want to make the decision as to whether or not you want to continue with those tenants. I've had a lot of folks buy multifamily homes and pretty much notice that all the tenants have to move out. They want the building vacant so they can put their own tenants in place. So that's one of the things that you want to consider. There's nothing worse than looking at the numbers and the numbers make sense, and then you have tenants that are already in place and you inherit headaches that are already existing as far as the property is concerned. So you really want to get to know who the tenants are, what they're paying, and what their background is. Let's look at this presentation where I put together some of the things that you need to look for if you're going to be a real estate investor and look at multi-unit properties. As you just saw in that presentation, one of the things that was pointed out was the overall condition of the building. You know, sometimes you see multi-unit buildings that come up for sale, and it's either because of a foreclosure or whatever situation it might be. It might be a vacant house. And you have an opportunity to buy it low and then fix it up and get tenants in at market rate and actually start to turn a profit on operating that building. But you got to be very careful. You want to look at the structural situations of the building. You also want to look at any needed repairs. I mean, you can buy an old building that may need all new windows and updated kitchens and baths, and you could spend a lot of money and then find that based on your investment, you can't get the rents you need in place to cover what you just spent. So you got to be very careful in looking at the overall condition of the building. So not only do you want to do a price look at how much the building's going to cost to operate compared to the rents you're going to be able to bring in and what possible tenants are paying, but you also want to look at the repairs that are needed. The final thing that you want to look at is the utilities. I've had people in the past buy multi-unit buildings, and they're the older buildings where there's only one service coming into the building. So they've had to factor into their costs the costs of utilities. Now, it's really hard to control the use of utilities when it comes to tenants. If you don't have the individual utilities for each unit separated, you're going to have abuse happening. And I don't mean to be critical here, but some people like to keep their places very, very warm in the winter. Other people like to keep things very, very cool in the summertime. And if you have no control over that, you may find the utility costs far outweigh the amount of money that's coming in for rent. And it's really hard to predict those costs in order to set a rent that's going to be enough to cover that expense. So what you want to look for, a key item when you're looking at a multi-unit building, is to see if all the utilities are separated. In other words, does each unit have its own utility setup, its own electric, its own heat, where the tenants are paying their own costs there and you're just collecting a rent on the space itself. You also want to look at what they call an owner's box possibility. Most multi-unit properties will have what they call common areas. Now, if it's an apartment building, you're going to have the lobby or entranceway. You're going to have the parking lot. If it's a multi-family, you may have the basement or the laundry room or things along those lines. And you want to make sure that there's a separate system to control the expenses on those areas. As I said, it's called the owner's box. If you're looking at a multi-unit property and it does not have separate utilities for each unit and it doesn't have an owner's box, that's an expense factor that you have to fit in to your approach in buying the building, because it could get quite expensive to separate those. Let's take a look at this quick presentation, and I'll be back to talk about some of the things that you need to watch out for when you do finally become a landlord. We're talking about real estate investments, and especially if you're purchasing multifamilies or a multi-unit building. And I just wanted to go over some of the things that are the things you need to be concerned about once you do accomplish. Now, my recommendation, and the recommendation of many people in real estate, is if you're going to buy multi-unit buildings or multi-families, you start off with one. Not everybody is adaptable to being a landlord. It's a great idea and it may look good on paper, but in reality, it may be more than you wish to deal with. So the advice is to start off with one property. Purchase that property, perhaps live in that property and rent out the other units, and get used to the idea of managing that property before you look at investing in other properties. Let's talk about vacancies. That's one of the biggest challenges of being a landlord. When you own a multi-unit building, you want to keep it occupied with good tenants. That income is very important. You don't want to carry a lot of empty apartments for a long period of time. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. When you're looking to rent the units, you're going to look at the market and what the market is bearing as far as rents are concerned. And just like when a realtor comes out and prices a home for sale, you want to make sure that your rents are going to be competitive. A lot of landlords make the mistake of when they have a vacancy, they look at the market rate and they immediately go to the top of the market. They want top dollar for the space. And they find that the space sits there vacant. This is really something that happens when you're looking at commercial space. I mean, how many of you have driven around and seen commercial store areas or buildings that just sit vacant, it seems like, for months and months and years and years? If anything else, it may be because it's just priced too high and the landlord has pretty much put himself out of the market. And as I said, as an owner of property, it doesn't do you any good to have those properties vacant. You want to have tenants in paying the rent. So really be careful of not pricing too high to the market. You want to make sure you're pricing competitively so you can attract more people to look at that vacancy and get somebody in there. The other thing that you want to do is you want to do your homework. When you become a property owner of a multi-unit building, you now have to worry about all the fair housing laws and regulations. You want to make sure that you're not being discriminatory against any party or area. So you really want to take the time to educate yourself on the fair housing laws so that you're not getting yourself into hot water when it comes to screening and renting for tenants. This comes into play a number of different ways, even right down to the disclosures and the way that you advertise that vacancy. So take the time to educate yourself. Plenty of information on the web. There are classes that are out there for new landlords to take. There are realtors out there to talk to. There are attorneys to talk to. There's plenty of information to spend the time to educate yourself, because by educating yourself, you're going to find yourself not getting into hot water as you go along. Investing in real estate properties, you might want to also look at the possibility of your vacancies of trying to fill them too fast. Now, I had just mentioned about commercial properties where you see a lot of those vacant for a long period of time. Sometimes that's a good thing. You don't want to undercut the market to just get a tenant quickly in place and end up picking the wrong tenant. Sometimes it's prudent to just sit back and take your time, if you can afford to do it, and keep that property vacant until you find the right match at the right dollars that work for you. So again, you have to know what your costs are, you have to know what your ability is, and also you have to look at your time schedule as to when you need to get a tenant into that property. When you're advertising vacancies, one of the hints that came up in an article that I reviewed was if you're looking at top dollar or you're looking at a competitive rate for a rent, You want to also put into the advertising something that makes that vacancy or that area appeal to a tenant. One of the things that we've done as realtors when we're advertising residential homes is we may put in a description of the area itself, saying things like it's close to shopping or it's close to traveling as far as a highway is concerned. So what you're trying to do is paint a picture of what it would be like living there compared to living somewhere else. So get really creative when it comes to your advertising, but again, be very careful with fair housing and the way that you're describing things. You don't want to be discriminatory. The biggest piece of advice that I can give as far as investing in multi-unit properties is, as I said earlier, start off slow. Don't decide to buy a multi-unit property, get it all rented, and immediately buy another one, get that rented, and buy another one, and so on and so forth, and build too fast. Because you may find yourself and your costs getting completely out of control. So take your time, one at a time, make sure you have that particular property under control, and then maybe look at a second or a third, or depending what your goals are going to be. Let's take a look in review of this presentation on some of the things you should do when you do become the landlord, and I'll be back with my comments in the real estate mailbag. This is the part of the real estate show I call the real estate mailbag. It's my opportunity to address questions that are sent to me at the email address that you see below, or are asked to me when I'm out and about in the general public. And since we're talking about multifamilies or small unit buildings or real estate investing, the question that came in was a pretty good idea of what is experienced when you have a multifamily property and you're dealing with tenants. In this particular case, the individual is talking about they own several multifamily properties and they're self-managing. In other words, as the landlord, they're taking care of everything on their properties, and they're finding that it's becoming a real juggling act. It's a little bit too much for them to be managing all these different properties, getting those calls, the toilet's backed up, there's no heat, power's off, whatever the situation might be. And consistently hiring outside sources to take care of things, that plumber, that electrician, is just really expensive. The option is to look at property management companies. Shop around, see what services the property management company offers, and see if it works out for you as far as your cost approach is concerned and the income to hire an outside firm to take care of what needs to be taken care of when those emergencies come up. Property management firms usually have all the people and things in place in order to do what needs to be done in order to make sure that your property operates correctly, your tenants stay happy, and you stay profitable. My name is Rick Naples, and this has been the Real Estate Show. I thank you very much for watching. See you next time.